Are Integy upgrades still crap? In this video, we're gonna find out. And to do so, we're gonna use some XRT knuckles, as well as this suspiciously inexpensive Mod 1.5 gear kit. And to do that, we're gonna use my awesome upgraded XRT. But before we do that, we've gotta replace these center differential gears, which I destroyed when I was experimenting with punch, turned it up too high on this Max 5 G2 ESC. Integy, or Integy, is a company that's been around for a really long time. They actually first started making parts in 1993, and anybody that's been in this hobby for a while is definitely going to be familiar with their name. And back in the early 2000s, before companies like Vitavon and Treal even existed, they were the go-to brand for aluminum upgrade parts. Unfortunately, their parts never really were the best in the world, and over the years they gained a reputation for having some substandard fitment and strength issues. This is a pretty similar story to what happened with GPM. However, GPM has really improved their products lately, and I've been curious to see if Integy has done the same thing. Their prices are definitely on the lower end of the spectrum, and their products are generally made out of 6061 aluminum, which isn't quite as good as the aluminum that we see from companies like Treal and Vitavon. But like I said, their prices are also a lot lower, and if the products they make are decent enough, they could still be a good deal. I've gotten to the point where I trust modern GPM products and use them quite a bit. For instance, these pins here are a must-have upgrade for the x-maxx and XRT, and they come straight from GPM. I've never had a problem with a single one of them. As a matter of fact, the center differential gears we're putting in are going to be GPM upgraded ones, and I expect them to do really well. Now, speaking of old parts, let me know down in the comments what your favorite old aftermarket product company was. I really loved Novak ESCs and motors, but there are a ton of old companies that aren't around anymore. All right, finally we can get to the center differential. As you can see, the teeth on here aren't too bad, but they are chewed up a little bit. And of course, you can see the shrapnel from the mating gear. When you have a catastrophic failure like that, it's really important to clean and inspect everything. It's very easy to miss a little bit of shrapnel in here, and if you do, you're probably going to be going back in soon. If there's any doubt, the best thing to do is just to go ahead and replace the plastic parts that were associated with the failure. As you can see, a piece was actually hiding right here, so that inspection's really important. As opposed to the stock sintered steel gear, we've got a machined hardened GPM gear here. This should hold up a lot better. And if you're careful, you can swap these out without having to completely disassemble the differential. Just don't forget your washer and your seal. And now I just put it back together. You always want to make sure you clean these screws really well because there's a good chance they're going to have some residue from the differential fluid on them. Don't forget your thread locker, and try to not get any of that differential fluid in the holes because it can prevent the thread locker from working properly. I've had quite a few questions about thread locker. First of all, I want to say that this is my favorite thread locker. It's Vibratite. It's a gel in a little pump. It's pretty clean and it does hold well and still lets go when you need it to. There are obviously a lot of different options and some of them are better for different applications than others. I like this Vibratite blue gel for pretty much anything that is metal going into metal. So if you've got steel going into aluminum or steel going into steel, the blue gel works well. The exception to that might be pinion gears. They tend to come loose more than pretty much anything else just due to the forces and vibration they're subject to. With those, I think red Loctite works pretty well. It's obviously going to be more difficult to remove, but thread locker doesn't work on these small screws the same way it does on larger fasteners. So generally speaking, as long as you don't go crazy with it, red thread locker will be fine on a pinion. You might just need to use a little bit of heat to take it off. All right, let's get this put back together. As you've noticed, I'm just putting the tiniest whiff of grease on these gears, and really that's all you need in this application. The actual grease that the gears are using is a microscopic film, and adding anything more than just a small amount to the teeth is just gonna sling off and make a mess. It really doesn't accomplish anything. Some people like to add a whole lot of grease to a housing in order to try to waterproof it, and that might work. I've never really had good luck with it, but some people swear by that. It's definitely something to try if you want to experiment with something different, though it definitely makes a big mess to clean up later. Let's go ahead and address this spur shaft. First thing we need to do is take this old gear off. And to replace it, we're going to be using this incredibly cheap set of gears that I got from Integy. The spur gear is a little bit rough looking, but again, it was cheap, and these pinion gears look to be pretty good quality. They don't quite look up to the quality of Saga, but for $30 for all of this, if these hold up well, this could be a great deal. Let's get it installed. I also picked up this aluminum cush drive housing to replace the stock plastic one. I've never tried one of these before, but anytime you can add stiffness to the gear train, it's going to be a good thing. I've had a lot of people ask me whether or not they should keep their cush drive. I personally think it's a really good thing to have. It uses this little rubber here to absorb shock loads in the drivetrain, which really helps supplement that center differential and can help save your gears and your motor bearings. It looks like this is designed not to use this plastic washer. You can tell because there's a couple little tabs on here that go in these slots. Seems to fit together pretty well. Don't forget your thread locker. I always like to keep these stock parts if they're good. They're great for spares, and if for some reason this doesn't work out, you won't have to buy another one. Unfortunately, these two don't seem to quite fit together. That's not necessarily a fault of either one of these parts. It's just two aftermarket parts that were both designed to fit with the original stock parts. I'm gonna do just a little bit of clearancing, and that should take care of it. About 30 seconds with a file, and they fit together perfectly. Again, that's not necessarily the fault of either part. They were very, very close to fitting, and I suspect that the gear would have fit just fine on the plastic part, and the aluminum part probably would have fit just fine in the Traxxas gear, because the Traxxas gear does have a bit more clearance. Let's see how this gear tracks. That looks nice and straight. Always make sure you check your bearings when you're working on things. These bearings tend to go bad pretty often, and I've very rarely done any work on a vehicle without having to replace at least one of them. If you're enjoying this video, now's a great time to get subscribed. We do videos like this here all the time, and you're not gonna wanna miss them. I definitely recommend using an aluminum spur shaft cover, and keep in mind you can run longer screws into this cover. The stock screws are pretty short compared to the depth of the holes in the chassis, and longer screws can definitely make it stronger. The other part we're going to be testing are these front knuckles. These are made of 6061 aluminum, and these don't represent quite as good of a deal as the gears do, but they are still a bit cheaper than some other options. These knuckles are probably one of the highest stressed parts on a truck like this, especially with the big tires we're going to be running and how much this truck weighs. I think this is going to be a really good test between this and the gears to see just how good modern Integy parts are. How well the aluminum knuckle fits on here will also be quite telling, as there's quite a few different tolerances that need to be met in order for it to fit properly. The updated knuckles that come on the Traxxas XRT are actually quite a bit better than the ones that come on the x-maxx, but the aluminum one should still be stronger. Let's see how this bearing fits. That's a nice close fit. I'd say that's just about perfect. That front bearing fits just about perfect as well. Basically with bearings, you want them to slide in if you get them completely straight, yet not be loose at all, and that's a pretty tight tolerance to hit. It also seems to fit perfectly on the plastic hub. So far, I'm pretty impressed with the tolerances on this. All right, I'm pretty surprised. The fit on this so far is absolutely perfect. I kind of expected it to not be. Here we go, guys. We've got the beautiful blue knuckle installed. We've got the new spur gear installed. They look good and they fit well, but will they run well? Let's go find out. Okay, I've got about 3 packs for these parts now, and what do I think about them? Well, first of all, let's talk about the gear. I am not super impressed with this spur gear. The wear that I'm seeing on here is a little bit excessive for 3 packs, and to be honest with you, I'm not really surprised about that. When you spend $30 for 5 gears, I don't think it's reasonable to expect them to be very good, and these don't seem like they are. I expect this gear to last maybe another 3 or 4 packs before it needs to be replaced, so I would not recommend getting this spur gear. On the other hand, these steering knuckles are great. They fit really, really well. They've held up well. They've taken some pretty serious hits, and so far I'm really impressed with them, especially for the money. So overall, what do I think of Integy? Well, I think their aluminum parts have definitely come a long way since last time I tried them. However, they are still producing parts that aren't the best in the world, and it's going to be hard to know what you're going to get when you order something when some of the parts are good and some of the parts aren't. That being said, I think it's always good to try new things, so I'd recommend giving them a try, maybe for some aluminum parts, if not for the gears. And then why don't you give subscribing to this channel a try? Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.